Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Larry and Carol.
All right, thank you everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Would have liked to have come up, but it's supposed to rain. It's supposed to snow 20 to 30 inches here in Woodland Park, so wasn't sure I'd ever get back home. But this is works out pretty good, hopefully as well. Well, just a little background. I joined the photo section back in 2017, and it was after the last solar eclipse. And I remember coming in and doing my first talk to the section back in September of 2018. And my talk was called Video Slideshows Displaying Your Photographs to Non-Photographers. So by way of example, in my presentation, I shared a 3-minute video slideshow with music and everything that was of the 2017 solar eclipse. So here I am back again talking about eclipses. Done a few presentations since then, of course. My co-presenter is Kara Marcus. Kara is a person I met through Facebook. I admired the astrophotography work that she and her husband James were doing from their backyard in Colorado Springs. And I liked it so much that I invited her to make a presentation to the section back in October of 2020. Well, this was in the middle of COVID, so again, I think we did it by Zoom call probably.
We did.
And James and Kara, their work has only improved over time. And I'm really blown away when I look at their deep sky astrophotography. I mean, it just looks like it was taken through a huge telescope. And anyway, they have multiple telescopes. We'll get into that a little bit later. But we're going to talk about total solar eclipses tonight. And these are relatively infrequent events. So I've seen now 2 of them. This will be my third. Kara, I think. Is this also
Same here?
Okay.
Well, I've only seen I've only seen 1 total solar eclipse, and I've seen 1 annular eclipse. So this will be my 3rd eclipse, but it'll be my 2nd total solar eclipse.
Yeah, same for me. And when totality only lasts 2.5 minutes, it's hard to become an expert, is what I found.
No practicing.
It's easy to make mistakes. And what I hope I can share, even though I'm not an expert at taking pictures of eclipses, and neither would Kara claim to be that expert either. Still, we can share what we did, what we think we did right, some things maybe that we did wrong, some things we're going to do differently this next eclipse, and just how we're going to go about planning for the eclipse that's coming up. By the way, in less than a month now. So what is the goal of this talk? Well, actually, to be honest with you, the goal of the talk is to motivate you, if you hadn't made plans yet, to make plans to go see a total solar eclipse. As Kara mentioned, the next one that will be visible from North America is going to be 20 years from now. And some of us may not be around in 20 years. Of course, total solar eclipses happen more frequently, but you'll have to travel to them. And this is one that can be seen over a large portion of North America. So it is a golden opportunity. And I'll talk about how far you have to go to see it.
Well, and I was going to add, when we're talking about shooting total solar eclipses or going to observe them, whatever it is, whether it's a total, just eclipses in general, especially solar eclipses, because they are more unique than lunar eclipses. Those happen much more frequently. But with solar eclipses, if you are going to do it, this is my 2 cents based off of my track record. I've gotten lucky. We've seen 2 eclipses with perfectly clear skies. We've got very lucky. But this one, we just don't know what's going to happen. But we are going to travel to Texas, where my brother and his wife and children live. So if we get clouded out, at least we've got a trip going. We're going to be with family. We're going to make it a family trip, and we're going to have a vacation and go out to dinner and spend time together. So it's great to plan to go see an eclipse, but make sure that you have other things that you can do in case you bust, because the weather is completely out of our control. While we have so much control over the shutter speeds and the ISOs and the apertures, when it comes to weather, you're leaving it at the mercy, of the universe. And so you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket and then be really disappointed. So make sure that you have other things that you're going to do while you travel to see an eclipse.
Yeah. And yeah, I was going to make that point later, but that's fine. You made the point for me. So
sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's like an eclipse. We didn't practice.
Can everybody can see the screen, right? It says totality, the Great North American Eclipse. Y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Just want to make sure you could see it. Okay, so again, because I'm not an expert, I've relied heavily on those people who are experts. This book I found and downloaded on Kindle. It's really a great resource. I highly recommend you purchase it if you plan to go see the next eclipse. It covers everything from celestial mechanics to photography to history to scientific discoveries, all that and more, plus lots and lots of comments in there from people who have observed total solar eclipse and just been amazed at the sight and their reactions to it. So it's really a great resource. Fred Esplinek, kind of a real authority. You'll see his name on a number of websites, publications. He does a lot of the predictions of when these eclipses are coming. Plus, he's got some amazing photographs, and so he's one of the authors of this book. Highly recommended it. So in the first part of the talk, I'm kind of covering some basics, and I will be using concepts, and I'll be using some photographs taken from this book. Later in the talk, it'll be mostly slides, pictures that Kara and I took, and we'll be explaining, how we got them and what we did wrong, what we could have done better. So be patient, we'll get to those. Let me talk right now about what we're really going to cover. So I've got a few slides to sort of explain solar eclipses. We're not going to go into any great detail there, but it's important just to say a few things about why we have eclipses and why they happen so infrequently. Then I'll get into talking about the 2024 eclipse that's coming up, like I said, in less than a month, where you can see it, when you can see it, and just different resources that you would use for planning a trip if you're going to go see the eclipse. There's a fair amount of terminology that's talked about by eclipse viewers and photographers. So just to make sure everybody's familiar with that terminology, I'll kind of go through it. And that terminology will then lead right into talking about what are the targets. If you're going to photograph it, what should I be looking for, and when will it happen? So we'll talk about photo targets. We'll also talk about this really, I would say, an important topic of, do you go to view it, or do you go to try and photograph it, or do you try and do both? And Karen and I will share our experiences with what happened in the eclipses that we have gone to see, and maybe what our thinking is for this next one. And then some safety considerations. You can definitely damage your eyes, you can damage your camera. So we'll talk about some safety consideration. Karen and I will show you our setups for what we're going to use for photographing the eclipse. And then we'll get into that second part, where we'll look at two of the recent eclipses, the one in 2023 last year, which was an annular eclipse. I'll explain what that is. And then the 2017 total solar eclipse, which was the first one that she and I both had the privilege of seeing. And then we'll kind of close out by just talking about a little bit about planning and contingencies. Yes, always contingencies for a trip, because you can't predict the weather. All right, so I found this beautiful illustration of the sun online. Somebody had drawn this. I want to use it to kind of illustrate some of the key parts of the sun that we'll be talking about. and it will be photographing. Of course, you can't see the core of the sun. It's it's very hot, 15 million degrees centigrade. It's where the fusion is going on, that drives the energy that the sun produces. We come up to the photosphere, skipping some layers in the sun, which are not important for our purposes, and get to the photosphere, which is really the surface, the visible surface of the sun. It's about 200 miles deep. This is where, if you're looking not during an eclipse, you would see sunspots on the photosphere, the surface of the sun. It is approximately 500,000 times brighter than the corona. And that's why you can't see the corona. When the sun is not eclipsed, the corona is just too dim to be able to see compared to the brightness of the sun. So we have to wait until there's a total solar eclipse to be able to see the corona. The photosphere is relatively cool, only about 5,500 degrees centigrade, if you could call that cool. And then just above that starts the atmosphere of the sun. So there's several layers in the atmosphere, but the chromosphere is one layer, the lowermost layer of the atmosphere. It's about 1,600 miles thick. It's made up of plasma, and it's this vibrant red color. And when you see some of the eclipse photographs, you'll see that ring of vibrant red. You'll see the prominences, which are the things that kind of look like flames shooting out from the sun. So this is part of the atmosphere. There's also these things called spicules you can see on that photograph. Let me turn on my little pointer here, and I'll point to these little spicules here. So if you have a high resolution telescope camera, sometimes you'll see these in those pictures, but probably not visible with the kind of equipment that we're using. And then there's the corona. That's the upper atmosphere, and the corona extends quite a ways away from the sun, several diameters away from the surface of the sun. And it gets progressively dimmer. It is again only visible during totality. Interestingly, the corona is at a temperature of about 2 million degrees centigrade. And you might say, well, why is the corona hotter than the chromosphere or the photosphere? And it has to do with the magnetic, the strong magnetic field of the sun. I'm not an expert on this, and I'm not sure that scientists have totally explained why the corona is so hot, but that is an observation that because of the magnetism of the sun, it superheats that gas that's out there in the corona. Okay, so here's one of the first technical slides that I'll talk a little bit about. So the sun and the moon both have an angular size of about 1/2 degree. So if you were to hold your hand at arm's length out and you had a P between your forefinger and your thumb, that P would just cover the moon. It would just cover the sun. That's the size at arm's length that the sun or the moon appears. Now, a total eclipse occurs when the moon's umbra or shadow, shown down here, touches the Earth. It doesn't always touch the Earth, but sometimes it does. And what's interesting is the distance, the diameter of the sun is about 400 times the diameter of the moon. And seemingly coincidentally, the distance from the Earth to the sun is about 400 times the distance from the Earth to the moon. And that's what allows us, at least at this period in time in the Earth's history and the solar system's history, to experience a total solar eclipse here on Earth. At some point, the moon is progressively, the orbit is progressively getting further and further away from Earth. And at some point in the future, probably not in our lifetime, but out some thousands or millions of years, the moon will be too far away, and we will never experience another total solar eclipse on planet Earth again. So we're living in these exceptional times right now. The Earth's orbit and the moon's orbit are not circular, they're elliptical. So the distance, these distances, well, I talked about them approximately, they're actually varying along the path of both of the Earth and the moon. So when the sun is closer, then it's harder for the moon to completely cover it. And so when the moon is not large enough to completely cover the sun, that's when we see what's called annular eclipse. Okay. So let's talk about these different types of solar eclipses. I think probably everybody has seen a partial eclipse before. Actually, all of North America pretty much will experience a partial solar eclipse on the date of the next eclipse, but only a narrow band of North America will be able to experience a total solar eclipse. That will be where the moon completely covers the sun, and now, because we don't see the brilliance of the sun, we'll be able to see the corona and the chromosphere and the prominences and so forth. The eclipse that we had just last year was an annular eclipse. This is where the moon was not able to completely cover the sun. And so during totality, instead of seeing the corona, you see this ring of sun still remaining around the moon, which is eclipsing it. Kind of looks like a ring, doesn't it? They call that an annular eclipse.
And I will just interrupt real quick because it might be easier for people to remember. Annular actually is a derivative of a Latin word that means ring. So I can't remember. Let me see if I can look
Annulus,
it up.
yeah.
Is annulus? Annulus,
Yeah.
which means ring. And that helped me kind of like, oh, I get it now.
So I'm a geologist, an oil geologist, and an annulus is also a term used in the oil industry.
Oh, nice.
Between the drill pipe and the casing, that's where the cuttings are coming up. So yeah, it's a ring.
That's great.
Good point. Okay, my next technical slide here. So this explains why we don't see a total solar eclipse every month. It's really because the tilt of the moon's orbit around the Earth relative to the orbit of the Earth around the sun. So those two orbits are tilted by 5 degrees. And what that ends up causing is that they only overlap at these two nodes. So in the whole course of a year, you're only going to see that overlap of those orbits happening twice, about 6 months apart. So that's why eclipse season occurs about twice a year. The sun is approaching the node at about 1 degree per day. The moon, of course, is going around the Earth once every month or once every 28 days. So it's actually approaching the node at about 13 degrees per day. Now, the sun cannot pass a node without at least one solar eclipse. And 2 are possible because, again, because of these varying distances, it's possible to actually get 2 solar eclipses at one just separated by about a month. But neither of those will be a total solar eclipse, and I'm not even sure they would be an annular eclipse. I think they would both be partial eclipses. The sun can pass a node without a total eclipse or an annular eclipse. So if you look at the frequency that they've plotted up all the eclipses in the last 5,000 years and also projecting out the next few thousand years. And there's a good number of each of these types of eclipses. So they're all well represented. There's not like more of one than another. There's quite a few of each. Probably total solar is not quite as common as some of the others, but there's still quite a few of those as well. Any question on that before I go on? Okay. Well, let's move on then and talk about the next solar eclipse, which is less than 4 weeks away. So unfortunately, Colorado will only be able to see a partial. If you're willing to travel, there are many places in North America, from Mexico, 11 different states in the US, plus 5 different provinces of Canada, where the path of totality will be visible. So really, the date is April 8th, 2024. The closest state to us probably to see it is Texas. But again, if you have relatives I was talking to somebody that had a relative in New York and they're going to go see the eclipse up in New York, and that's fine. You might be clouded out, but it'll be there as well. The timing is just around noon till about mid-afternoon on the 8th of April. And then the duration of totality. So duration varies with distance from the center of the path. If you're in the very center of the eclipse path totality, you'll get the longest duration. But it also varies along the eclipse path. So for this particular eclipse, the closer you are to Mexico, the longer the eclipse will be. So if you're down on the Texas-Mexico border, you'll get a few seconds more of eclipse than you will if you're up in Dallas, where I plan to be. But if you go all the way up to Newfoundland, where the last place where you'll see it on North America, you'll lose about a minute and a half of totality. So it'll be under 3 minutes of totality in the center there. And this little chart really gives you, for some of the major cities in Texas, kind of when the eclipse begins, when the partial eclipse begins, when totality begins, and then when totality ends, like 4 minutes later, and then when partial eclipse ends, and also gives you the duration and so forth. Well, let's take a look at this sort of in map view. This is a map that's you can download from the internet. And in yellow, you can see the path of the total solar eclipse coming through here, again, starting in Mexico, running through the US, all the way up to Newfoundland. And the nearest point for people in central Colorado Springs or Denver would be Texas. Northern Texas. And again, the other thing to consider about this is weather, because this is happening in April. What's the weather going to be doing? I know a lot of the Midwest sometimes is still covered in clouds. A lot of the Northeast is covered in clouds. Probably the people that predict weather say that actually the further south you are, the greater likelihood is that you will be able to see the eclipse without having interference from weather. So if you're in South Texas, you're probably a little bit better off than in Dallas, but Dallas is probably a lot better off than most of the country. And there are predictors of how much cloud cover there will be during the eclipse. The other thing that's interesting to note on this diagram is these lines that are parallel to the path of total eclipse. So you can see that at where we are here in Denver, if we come out to here, we're at about 60 to 65% of the sun will be eclipsed. So if you don't travel, you want to go out and see a partial eclipse, you'll be able to see it. You just won't see a total eclipse. You'll see about 65% of the sun covered. And of course, the further you get away from the path of totality, the less and less of the sun will be covered. So by the time you get to Seattle, for example, only 20% of the eclipse of the sun will be covered. Well, this map illustrates just how many people in the US will have a chance to see the eclipse in April. So if you are in the path of totality, and there are many major cities that are, almost 32 million people will be able to see the total solar eclipse. That's a lot of people. If you're willing to travel 350 miles to get to the path of totality, then you'd be one of 100 million people that would be doing that. And if you're willing to travel 800 miles, if you're willing to travel 800 miles, like from central Colorado, then you might be one of 263 million people trying to see this eclipse. The path of this eclipse is actually covering more populated areas in North America than the last one. And the last one, a lot of people saw the eclipse, but this is probably going to be maybe the biggest crowd ever to watch an eclipse in North America, maybe even in the world. I don't know. A lot of people are going to see this eclipse. And what does that mean? Well, that means traffic. That means crowds. That means hotels are going to be booked up. So if you are thinking about going, don't wait till the last minute. Either have a relative that you're going to stay with, get a hotel reservation, figure out where you're going, and be ready, because even coming back from the least populated state in America, Wyoming, in 2017, we ran into horrendous traffic jams just trying to get out of central Wyoming and back to Colorado. There were a lot of people that traveled from Colorado up to Wyoming to see it. Well, zooming in a little bit closer to the state of Texas, where I'm going to go. My daughter lives in Dallas, and so we're going to go to Dallas here, and then we're probably going to move a little bit further east to get into the central path of totality here. You can also see on this diagram how long totality will last. So if you're on the edge here, of course, it's going to be very, very slight. As you move toward the center, you cross the 3-minute mark, 4-minute mark, and finally get up to about 4.5 minutes, right about here, a little west of Waco. And then it decreases again. So the closer you can be to the center, the longer it will be, and the longer you'll have to photograph it. I think, Kara, I think you're going to be somewhere down here, right?
Yeah,
west of
my brother lives just outside of Austin in a little suburb called Hutto, and I was talking to him today, and he mentioned Fredericksburg. So we're probably going to head about an hour and 20 minutes west of the Austin area to try to get a little bit longer of totality for sure.
Some of the scientific organizations that I kind of follow, they're all having eclipse parties. They're all having them in Texas. They're all, doing it on a ranch or whatever. So again, I'm not trying to dissuade you. I'm just trying to warn you that there's going to be a lot of people seeing this eclipse, and so make your plans.
Well, and it's very, I'll just throw in a very short story for the annular eclipse. We were set to go to Albuquerque, and our Expedia lost our hotel reservation. And so we ended up driving to Chinle, Arizona. And I don't know how we were able to even find a place to stay. And that was an annular eclipse, and total solar eclipses are even more popular than annular solar eclipses. So it's best if you have somebody, family or friends, that you can connect with and plan with, because it can be very, very easy for something to go wrong. And then do you not have kind of a backup, a contingency, like you mentioned in the beginning?
Yeah, very good. All right, I'm going to let Kara kind of explain this slide here.
Well, I just came across this, so I don't totally know how it works yet, but I did pay the $2 to get the full access to this. This is an app. And Larry, let me ask you, because you put this on your phone as well, right?
Right.
Do you have Apple or Android?
Android.
Okay, so you can get it for either Apple or Android. I have Apple, no problem finding it. I stumbled across this when I was doing a little bit of research about like the timings for the different contacts, and I'm sure you're going to discuss that here in a minute. The different contact points of a total solar eclipse. And I came across a YouTube video, and the guy that was doing the video, he was the one that actually, this is his app. So, and he wrote this app because he's photographed, I think, more eclipses than I may ever get the chance to. So I put this on my phone, and what I really liked about it, I'll just pull it up while I'm sitting here. You can do some test sounds on here to kind of see what it will do. So like, here's a test. Let's see.
Eclipse event, open app.
So it'll remind you to open your app when it's coming up to the start of the eclipse, which Larry said will be around noon, depending on where you are.
Second contact in 2 minutes. Observe for shadow bands.
So it'll remind you 2 minutes ahead of second contact to where you want to prepare whatever you're going to prepare, as far as, taking off your filter or changing your exposures or your ISO, however you're going to adjust your camera settings for the right exposure for what you're wanting to do. And then I thought there was a third one on here. Let's see.
Yeah, so what I did here, because Kara told me about this yesterday, was I downloaded it And then since my daughter's home is right in the total eclipse pathway, I just put in the coordinates for her home. And then it calculated the various contact times. I'm going to talk about contacts on the next slide. And then it fills in to tell you exactly when to expect the maximum eclipse, when to be looking for these various things that we're going to be talking about that are targets that are so fleeting. You have so little time to actually, you have to be prepared. You have to be ready. You have to know exactly when it's going to happen or you'll miss it.
Yes, and this is I just felt like this was a great tool because you can look at even on here, it's got even past eclipses, so you can kind of see how it worked previous to the one that's coming up. So you can do a little bit of research on that. If your phone is on silence, but your watch is not, I believe it will alert your watch, it'll vibrate you. So if if you mess up and you leave it on silent, don't hold me to it, but I do think that it would vibrate your wrist and remind you, oh, I need to check I need to see where we're at and where we're going forward. It just seemed really, it's got timers for it. It's got Eclipse data on it. It's got different ways of looking through different parts, like you said, using your geolocation. So wherever you are, it will find you and it will work for you.
So I think the app itself is free to download. The data for the 2024 eclipse, I think I had to pay like $2 or something.
Same here, $2.
Access that data. The icon, if you're looking on your to find the app, this is what the icon looks like. You can search for solar eclipse timers app, and this one will pop up along with probably a few others. So
yeah, this is just the first one I came across, and I just watched when you first pay. Well, I don't even think it's when you pay. No, it's not even when you pay. When you first open the app, it has a tutorial you can go through, and it'll show you step by step the order of operations that you want to look for, the way to geolocate, how to get the information that you need. It just seemed really well written to me, so I do hope that it works well for us.
Yeah, thank you, Kara, for
yes
alerting me to that. So
definitely.
Yeah, so we've already used some terminology here that I haven't defined. We were talking about contacts, first contact through fourth contact. This is terminology that Eclipse viewers use. So first contact really is when the moon just starts just touches the edge of the sun and the eclipse begins. And then second contact is just right as totality begins. Let's imagine the moon motion relative to the sun. The moon is coming this way, and it's covering more and more and more and more of the sun until finally there's just a little sliver left, and that's going to be second contact. Now, frequently during a total solar eclipse, the reason we have 4 minutes and not 0 minutes is because the moon is bigger relative to the sun at this particular time in its orbit. And so it'll take some time before the third contact, which is where now the moon has continued moving relative to the sun, and we begin to see the crescent on the other side. And we'll see more and more of the sun appearing until we get to the fourth contact. Fourth contact, the eclipse is over. First contact, it's just starting. And then the second and third really define totality. And then usually, like the app that we just looked at, it'll tell you what is the center point of totality for the location that you're at. So there's a kind of critical terminology to know.
And I know that we're going to talk about safety a little bit later on in this discussion, but I do want to mention the only time, excuse me, the only time that you can observe with your eye without your solar eclipse glasses on is maximum eclipse. You can't do it with second contact, and you can't do it with third. Your camera can, and your sensor can, but you physically can't. Otherwise, you will damage your eyes. So just know that until it's maximum eclipse, do not take your solar eclipse glasses off.
Good point. Yes. Okay. So here again is where the book was invaluable, because there are a lot of targets. There's a lot of things to photograph during a total solar eclipse that may not be obvious, and they're not all just looking at the eclipse. So, for example, I think Yao showed a picture of some of these a few months ago, maybe in one of our meetings. These are pinhole images. So the little pinholes in the leaves and between the leaves will act like a pinhole camera, and will create these little crescents on the ground, and you can see that on the ground. And
I don't know if you can see mine, but this was from the annular.
oh, there you go. There you go.
Mhm.
So again, I was so focused on the sun and trying to get everything else. I wasn't looking at the ground, or it wasn't an extra tree. So just know that there are things like that. Another thing to look for is shadow bands. Okay, so what are shadow bands? These are faint undulations of light rippling across the ground at jogging speed. They're sometimes visible just before or after totality. Shadow band, I'm reading a quote here, as you can tell. Shadow bands occur when the crescent of the remaining sun becomes very, very narrow, so that only a thin shaft of sunlight enters the atmosphere of the Earth overhead. There it encounters currents of warmer and cooler air, which have slightly different densities. And these different densities act as weak prisms to bend the light passing from one parcel to the next. So it's really just that last bit of light coming through the atmosphere gets refracted by different temperatures as it's coming through, and it'll create these cool shadows called shadow bands. Again, you don't see this in every eclipse. They're very hard to see, but again, I wasn't looking for them, so maybe this time I will be more cognizant of that happening. Okay, on the right-hand side here, the diamond ring and Bailey's beads. Now, these were two targets that were absolutely a must for me in the last eclipse, and this is why I was so focused on looking through my camera that I almost missed enjoying the eclipse. Just before, like 10 seconds or so before totality, when you're almost covering, you'll get just a little tiny sliver, and with the right exposure, and I'll show you my pictures. I got one that wasn't so good, and I got one that was really good, of the diamond ring effect, where you actually see sort of a ring of the corona around, forming the ring, and then you'll see what looks like the diamond right here, just from that last glimmer. Again, as Kara mentioned, you don't want to be looking at this without solar. You won't see the effect through solar glasses, and you don't want to take your solar glasses off in order to try and see it, because you'll just damage your eyes.
Yeah.
And then just literally minutes, seconds later, the timing between a diamond ring and Bailey's beads is like 10 seconds or less. As that last glimmer, what's happening here is the sun is coming through these different valleys, so the surface of the moon is not smooth. It's obviously got craters and valleys, and as it goes through those, the last bits goes through these craters, you get these little beads here, and they're very ephemeral. They'll be gone just in a few seconds. It's very hard to capture this. But again, if you're looking for it, if you have the right exposure, you can get this isolation where you see these different separate little beads. Again, the sun just coming through those valleys right before totality. Okay, let's go on to a couple more things here. Okay, so before and after totality, something to look for is sunspots. You can often see those on the photosphere. So I've got a couple of sunspots right here, a couple of big ones. There's some more over here and here that can be seen. And these are on the photosphere. They're dark regions on the surface of the sun, again, caused by magnetic fields. And then over here, this is one of Kara's photographs where she, just before totality, she captured the chromosphere. You see that redness of the chromosphere. Chroma means color or red. And then you see the prominences here. Prominence here, here, here. And then this outer white area is called the corona. So that's a very important target, of course. This was one that I was really focused on. Carrie, do you want to say anything else about that photograph?
Oh, that one, there's a story behind that one. And I actually had my husband bring it up. I'm going to show you what I used to shoot that, because I did not use a long lens because I didn't have a long lens back then. And I'll keep this on the short side, but my brother gave this to me as a hand-me-down before we got into astrophotography, and it's a 1000 millimeter spotting scope. And so I had an adapter for this for my Nikon, and I had it set up on a tripod, and I was looking through the viewfinder during totality when it was safe to look through at it, and my tripod was falling over and things were not going well. The fact that I got this image at all was kind of miraculous, because it was kind of like you said, how you were, what was the word you used during totality? You were nervous.
I was so nervous. Yeah.
I was nervous too. I was shaking. I couldn't find it because I managed to get a couple of pictures with this setup, and one of them was the diamond ring. I forgot to send you this picture. I'm sorry, Larry, but I did get I did get a very small, slight diamond ring with mine. That's not turning out so good in there. But I am going to attempt to do this again with this one, just because, I feel like I managed to pull it off last time, and I think that I could handle it. And it's not a big piece of equipment. But I remember messing with the shutter speeds, and I was just going as fast as I could think, trying to get anything out of it. And I will tell you this, I do a lot of post-processing on my images. If you get close, it's not hard to fix Eclipse pictures in Photoshop or other processing softwares after the fact. If you can get your exposure close, you can definitely pull it out. And that, I feel like this was kind of that for me. It may not have been perfect right out of the camera, but I got it close enough that some things really showed up nicely after the fact.
Yeah. I'm looking at my time here, and I'm going to have to speed up my presentation, so bear with me a little bit here. Of course, the corona, this is the outer corona. I did not get this when I shot the 2017. I didn't have a long enough exposure, but Kara got some beautiful shots. I think you were using a 200 millimeter lens at that point.
I did not have my 600, so yes.
And then this one here I took out of the book. So Earthshine, what is Earthshine? So obviously the sun illuminates the earth, and it reflects back to the dark side of the moon. And if you use the proper exposure, it's going to be a very, very long exposure, like several seconds. You can actually bring out detail on the dark side of the moon as it's eclipsing the sun. You probably have to stack it. I'm not sure exactly how this photograph was made, but I think it's a very cool image.
It's definitely, I would assume it's blended. And if you take bracketed images during totality, that's definitely something that you can find a lot of tutorials on, as far as blending and stacking images to get all of the exposures in one.
Okay. A lot of photographers shoot a series of exposures to capture the wide range of brightness in the corona. So this is a series of 9 photographs, 125th of a second to 2 seconds at ISO 400. And you can see, the corona really does extend a long way out, but it is very dim, and it gets dimmer and dimmer. So you have to bracket your exposures. And this is definitely going to be one of the targets that I have. I may use just a regular camera with a telephoto lens as opposed to my long telephoto. I'm going to have 2 cameras set up when I'm out there. All right, let's move on to this question, very important question. Am I going to view or am I going to photograph? And the reason it's critical is we're only going to have 4.5 minutes of totality, and that goes by so quickly. In 2017, I was really exclusively concentrating on these targets that are listed to the right. So I really wanted to get the diamond ring, Bailey's beads, the chromosphere, the prominences, the corona, and so almost to the exclusion that, I did notice it got dark, In fact, it got so dark, I couldn't, I had to get a flashlight out to actually read some of the settings that I wanted to use on my camera, and actually to set my camera. It was so dark. Temperature definitely got down. You can't photograph that, of course, but you can photograph a lot of other things over here. These crescents, shadow bands, the shadow of the earth, of the moon racing across the landscape. If you're up on a prominence where you can see the shadow approaching, that would be an amazing it'd be amazing video. I mean, the Earth's shadow is, or the moon's shadow is moving at thousands of miles an hour, so it's happening very, very quickly. And then again, the book really brings out, don't miss the reaction of people and animals. He has story after story after story of animals like packing it up. They're out there in the field and they pack it up thinking it's nighttime, and it's like they go to bed. And just all, birds are chirping, they stop chirping. And crickets are, well, crickets aren't chirping and then they start chirping. So there's all kinds of crazy things going on during a total solar eclipse that, again, I was so focused on capturing the stuff on the right, I missed a lot of that.
And I will say, let me just interject one thing. These smartphones, I did video right before it went into totality. I did video and I accidentally forgot to shut the video off, so it kept going. But if you could just set up your camera on your car, set it up to video the whole thing, so it captures how dark it gets, and you'll notice things, and then you can watch it just off your phone. You don't even have to prepare for that,
Oh, great suggestion. So really, you have to decide on your goals. And this is where the preparation comes in, where I'm urging you to figure out what it is you would want to do. What do you want to see? What do you want to do? These things here, diamond ring, Bailey's beads, you cannot see those visually. You have to take a picture of it, just because you have to remove the solar filter, and you don't want to do that and look at the sun, but you can briefly do it in your camera safely. The other thing I'll just, yeah. So again, even if you're photographing, don't do what I do. Do spend some time just looking at the eclipse. It's pretty remarkable.
It's amazing. It will change your perspective.
So a few words on safety. I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, never look at the sun without the solar filter. It's not just the brightness, it's also the heat and the UV radiation. Except during total solar eclipse, you need solar filters for all the partial phases. It needs to be attached to the front of your camera, the front of your lens, the front of your telescope, not the eyepiece. It has to be on the front. So ND filters, sometimes you'll see ND filters for photographing the solar eclipse. They're okay for photographing, I believe, but they're not okay for viewing, because unless you have the UV protection, you could damage your eyes without that. Now, of course, the safe alternative is just to look at it on the screen on the back of your camera. So I really recommend turning your live view on, looking at and composing your photographs in live view. Don't look through the eyepiece. In fact, close off the eyepiece so you don't get distracted or accidentally look through it, and just look on live view on the back of your monitor and do it that way. There are several different kinds of solar filters. Metal on glass is really the best and recommended for photography. Some of the other ones will work, and I don't really have experience to know how much degradation you would get, but just listening and reading what other people say, the metal on glass is the best for photography. And then one more slide. So you will see on these glasses, and you will see on the filters, a lot of times they'll say it's compliant with the ISO 12312-2 international standard. So just to be really clear about what this standard is, I did a little research on it. The standard is a standard. It's not testing. It's not certification. So they set a standard, and if people say, hey, what we made meets this standard, that's on them. Nobody's testing them to prove that it's actually certified to meet that standard. So don't get fooled by somebody that says it's compliant or it's been certified or anything like that. There's no certification. The other thing is the standard is really just for viewing. It's really just for Eclipse glasses for viewing. It's not actually meant for telescopes and cameras. Although they do say that if your filter that you're putting on your camera or on your telescope meets all the same specifications, it should be fine. And of course, everybody does that because there is no standard actually for photography. So again, use the live view, and you'll be okay.
This is the, I was just going to show, this is the filter that I used for the 20. This is the one that I've used for every eclipse I've seen. I don't know that they make this exact one anymore, but it is an Orion. I know it might look backwards on the screen, but it's an Orion solar filter. If anybody's interested, this one worked really well for me. I don't know what you use, Larry, but I thought I would show it.
Yeah. Well, actually on this slide here, I've got a picture here of my wife with the Eclipse glasses looking up at the sun. And then just recently, I ordered some solar filters to put on my binoculars. So there are ones you can get that have like a cardboard frame and a film. And I really wanted to get something that was a little sturdier, a little more secure. These slip on and off. They have little felt pads and they have little plastic nut that you use to tighten them. But these just slip over on top. It's best really to get the slip-on kind. You know, when you're trying to take a filter off and you have to screw it on and off and you're missing Bailey's beads, you're going to get really frustrated. So you're going to want to have a filter that you can take on and off very quickly and not one that you have to screw on and off. I paid about $120 for these two here. This is an aluminum frame. This is not glass, but the one that I got for my big lens is glass, and I paid about $100 for it. So you can get them much cheaper, but I wanted to get something that was really good and met the standards and was a little bit more secure. Okay, got to keep moving here. Here's my setup. I have a Nikon D810, which is a full frame Nikon. It's a DSLR. I also have an Olympus mirrorless, which I'll be using on the side, but not with a big lens like this. This is a 150 to 600 Tamron zoom lens, the G2 model. It's a very good lens, and a Sigma makes one as well, so similar to this. I think Kara and I both have this exact same lens and are both using it for the Eclipse. I have it mounted on a gimbal. This is a ProMaster tripod and a ProMaster gimbal. So this has worked really well for, like, you know, when you're photographing birds and you're trying to catch them in flight, but you can also use it very easily for the Eclipse. And it doesn't trying to do this on a ball head, I think would be pretty challenging, particularly if you don't have a drive mechanism, because you're always having to adjust to make sure that the sun is in the viewfinder. And so you want to be able to do that smoothly and easily. So, and then of course the filter that slips on end of it. Here's Kara's setup. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's changed a little from the pictures on the left. We've upgraded some things. But yes, so the picture on the right is at the annular eclipse in Chinle, Arizona in October. And that mount that you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see my mouse because I'm looking at your screen, but the mount up here, the kind of whitish gray part just under the lens. Yes, right there. That is, it's an expensive deep space astro mount. We take the good gear with us to the eclipses because we want to utilize it. So it's an RST 300 mount. And then on top of that, we have, the Tamron lens, just as yours, with this filter that I just showed you. And at the base, we have a Nikon D5600 on this one. And then this mount is on top of a tripod. And so what we did is we polar aligned to try to keep the sun in the frame of the camera and lens throughout the entire eclipse, we had to make some minor adjustments as we went, but it, for the most part, it kept it in the whole time. It worked really, really well. This is an extreme setup. You know, I wouldn't recommend this to somebody who's never used a tracking mount. I like your idea of a gimbal better for just kind of a photography enthusiast, but because we have this gear, we're going to try to automate it and utilize it for us specifically.
Thanks, Kara.
Sure.
Okay, so we talked about targets of photography. Let's talk a little bit about different types of photography. So a few are shown in this slide here. Long time lapse, where you're actually taking a time lapse and getting, you know, all the pictures of the various phases as well as totality. Short time lapse, here's one where they're just trying to get the emergence of Bailey's beads right on the edge. So just, this is, these are separated by, let's say 2 frames per second. So you can just imagine how quickly this is changing. This is happening, it doesn't actually say, but obviously this is happening over probably a 3-hour period at least. And then, you know, foregrounds, you know, that was one of the things that I was trying to do on the annual eclipse. I'll show you where we went, is to try and get a pretty cool foreground for some wide angle shots as we took pictures of the eclipse. This is obviously is a New York City, makes a pretty spectacular foreground there. And then stacking. This is one of the most amazing pictures I've ever seen of the corona. 72 separate exposures from 1,000th of a second to 2.5 seconds were combined and processed to create this one image here, which is spectacular. I don't think I'll ever get to the place where I can do something like that, but I'm pretty happy with what I've been able to do so far. And then what focal length to use? Okay, so this chart, this will also be in that handout for you. The outer frame is for a full sensor. So if you have a full frame camera, this would be the image at 500 millimeters. And then the yellow frame in here is if you have the Nikon crop sensor, the APS sensor. The Canon is the red that's just inside of that, a little bit less. And then the green here is the 4/3 sensor. So this is what it would be for my Olympus camera. A little bit, since I have a 600 millimeter lens, it'd be a little bit larger than that. When I was shooting in 2017, I had an APS-C Nikon, and so it was a 1.6 crop factor. So actually the lens was more like a 900 millimeter lens. It was a little bit harder to keep the sun centered in my viewfinder, but now that I'm using full frame and I got 36 megapixels to deal with, it's no problem. I mean, I'll be able to track this more easily, and then I'll just crop it afterwards. Any questions at this point? All right, we'll go on. Well, let's talk about exposures. Like you'll find lots and lots of different exposure guides for shooting the eclipse and different parts of the eclipse online. A couple points I want to make is your settings definitely vary depending on the target. So what you use for Bailey's beads is not what you use for the diamond ring. They're actually quite different. And then the other thing I want to point out is that all these exposure guides don't really all agree. There's not like one perfect setting. But as Kara said, there's actually quite a bit of latitude for most of these things, with a few exceptions. You know, if you're close, you're still okay, and you'll be okay if you process it afterwards. I would say the one exception might be Bailey's beads, in that if you overexpose it, what's going to happen is they're all going to merge together, and you're not going to get that separation. I'll show you a picture of that. So how you would use one of these, for example, this chart here, it's got the f-stop over here. I'm shooting at f8. I'm shooting at ISO 200. So if I want to shoot partial phases, 1,000th of a second would work. That's with the filter on. If I take the filter off to shoot prominences, it's the same setting, 1,000th of a second. So that's what's recommended by this particular guide. Here are the settings I used. I was at f8, ISO 200, 600 millimeter. I did partial phases at 3 different exposures. The 1/800th of a second worked pretty well. The prominences were really nice at 2,500th of a second. Although they also look good at 1/400th of a second. I'll show you examples of both of that. So my recommendation is bracket. Don't just shoot one, shoot several different exposures. Now, to make it simple for me, because I got 2 dials, one for setting f-stop and one for setting shutter speed, I just left the f-stop constant at f8. I left the ISO constant, and all I varied was the shutter speed. And that just simplifies a lot of things. Okay, here's another chart, similar, works a little bit different. Here's ISO 200, come over to f8 and then come down. Here's all the different things I can be shooting. So the corona at different radiuses from, if I want the inner corona, if I want the outer corona, prominences. And the settings on this particular chart are pretty similar again to what I was shooting. So for partial phases, 1/800th, it says 1,000th. For the inner corona, 1/400th, it's like between 1/500th and 1/25th. Bailey speeds 1/800th. Actually, I guess their camera didn't go to 1/800th of a second, but mine does. So it would be 1/800th of a second there for Bailey speeds. Okay, let's move on. This is a summary that I found online, just that you can use to kind of just be a mental checklist. So first of all, shoot RAW. When I was shooting back in 2017, I didn't even know what RAW was. And so everything I have from 2017 is JPEG. In 2023, of course, I was shooting RAW, and I will be shooting RAW again. Just pick a location, know your coordinates, know the timing, watch the weather, have a backup plan. Rehearse, practice and rehearse. I mean, you don't really want to be stumbling around with your equipment trying to remember how to do something in the moment of totality. You want to rehearse that, practice that, make sure you really know where everything is on your camera. And my Nikon has gotten less and less use as I've been switching over to Olympus. So I have to go back to my Nikon and remember where everything is, where all the settings are. And so if that's your case, then by all means, practice. Make a checklist of gear. He recommends using these semi-automatic modes or auto modes for the wide angle shots of totality. Of course, when I'm shooting close up through the 600 millimeter, I'm shooting in manual, and I'm adjusting the shutter speed as I need to. Use multiple exposures for the corona. If something goes wrong with some of your gear, just leave it. Don't try and fix it. Just enjoy the eclipse. Use what you have. Pull your phone out. Use your other camera. It goes by so quick. Just don't try and fix anything. And then I love the last 3 here. Watch the eclipse and enjoy. Watch the eclipse and enjoy. That's probably going to be repeating in my head as I'm frantically trying to get pictures. Is watch the eclipse and enjoy. So a good checklist for us as we prepare. Okay, we're going to get into now looking at our pictures from the last 2 eclipses. We're going to start with the annular eclipse and just show you how we prepared for it. This is a map showing the path of totality for the eclipse that happened in October 14th, 2023. And again, it just clipped the corner of Colorado, but it went all the way through central New Mexico. And so Kara and I both headed south to see the eclipse. And this eclipse, the annual eclipse, was about 2 minutes and 48 seconds. So again, not as long as the one that's coming up, which will be 4.5 minutes. Here's a close-up again, same kind of map that I showed you for Texas. So Kara, you went to Albuquerque, but then ended up in Chinle,
Arizona. I was actually
here somewhere.
Yeah, we were way up. We went up further, but and our totality max annulus was shorter than I had hoped. I wished we had been more central, but the fact that things fell apart and we were still able to see it at all was kind of like a saving grace at that point.
Yeah. So I just came down I-25 through Las Vegas, and then we came down to Santa Rosa, and we checked into a hotel, and our plan was to go to Vaughn the next morning to do the eclipse. But the weather forecast wasn't cooperating because it kept saying that there was going to be partly cloudy until noon, and the eclipse was going to be over by noon. Well, the totality was going to be over before noon. And so we started searching, looking at weather forecasts, and we started heading west because Albuquerque looked better. We ended up down here on this star here. So we had about 4.5 minutes. We weren't quite in the center, but I'll show you why we picked that location. There was a reason. So here's the reason. We set up in Salinas Pueblo Missions National Monument. It's kind of a remote monument. It's on the other side of the mountains from Albuquerque. I don't know if anybody's been there. There's actually 3 different units with 3 different pueblos. These are all from the 1500s. And anyway, it's a cool place. So I thought, okay, if we cloud it out, I'm going to see a new national monument I've never seen before. And at least I'll get pictures of the monument. Here's where we are set up right here. That's Ellen, and that's my tripod with the lens. It looks like there's nobody there, but actually there were quite a few people there. And actually the park rangers were handing out free eclipse glasses when we got there. So we got them for free, but we already had our own. And even the gas stations nearby were selling the eclipse glasses, so it was not hard to find them. There were some people set up inside of this pueblo, I guess, with their cameras, but they pretty much had the prime location, and I got there too late to be able to claim a spot. Okay, so now we get into some of our images. Here is an image I actually took after the eclipse. We got there a little bit too late to see first contact because we were driving further, but we got to see several sunspots. Again, through my Tamron 150 to 600, it was set at 600. And I did some sharpening and some texture and so on to just bring out the sunspots a little bit clearer on this image. And then I just made a montage here of all the different partial phases. This is, again, starting with totality, the annular eclipse. And it's interesting because if you were right smack dab in the middle, then the moon was right smack in the middle. If you were slightly off, then it was slightly off. I don't know if you noticed that in Chinle. If you
Yeah,
right,
I did.
yeah. So you didn't get it quite centered.
No.
To be right.
But
in
the
the
fact
center.
that we were still, it was still
got it.
within it. It was like, okay, good. That's good
It's
enough
good.
after everything we went through.
You can't see it in this diagram. I actually saw some little Bailey's beads along here, and if you zoom in, you can actually see it. But it's a little bit hard to see. Again, all of these are taken with the filter. You can't take the filter off. It's too bright. Even during totality, it's too bright. And because of that, you just don't have as much to photograph in an annular eclipse. Now, Kara's got some spectacular montages, so I'll let you just briefly describe what you've got here, Kara.
Oh, well, we go a little bit crazy with it. I think at the 2017 eclipse, when we did our sequence, we ended up with over 1,000 photos from start to finish. And then that gives you every option that you want to use for anything like this to combine them together and make something really, more artistic. And I would actually really like to get this one put on the wall at some point. And you've prepared, I think, in a lot more ways than me for like exposure, especially like the annular eclipse. I just kind of guessed at it, to be honest. I had my filter on. It looked good. I knew we were going to use the same exposure the whole way out because no matter what, I could fix it in Photoshop. So I just kind of went lazy. I don't want to do that with the total solar because of the many different contacts and the many different things that we are able to see in comparison to that of an annular eclipse. But something like this is really special when you can get, and you can see how far off I was from center because this is my max totality and my ring is really, really thin on one side and fat on the other. But like I said, we'd already driven to Albuquerque, everything fell apart. Then we had to drive farther. We almost didn't get a hotel room there. just the fact that I even got these pictures at all kind of amazed all of us. So, but yeah, in Photoshop, it's really not that hard, especially it's a lot easier with an annular eclipse to do images like this, where you can show the beginning all the way to the end. Of course, you have to have clear conditions the entire time. When you are dealing with putting things together that have the total eclipse, where you've got the chromosphere and you've got the prominences and you've got all of that going on, it takes a little bit more of a gentle hand, like with an eraser brush and stuff, to try to get it all to mesh together. But it's just one of many options that you can do. Is you can start from the beginning, go all the way to the end if the weather's good for it, and then you can really play around with how you want to lay it out in one photograph. Oh, this was another one. I kind of stole this idea. I'd seen this online and I thought I have to do something like that. And so this one was a lot of fun to put together, because there again, it shows the start, and then it shows all the way up to the total, the max annulus on this. And it was just kind of another creative way of splicing them together and showing the different coverage in kind of a different way, where it just gives it more of it's an appeal to look at. And this one, you can tell I photoshopped it. I kind of brightened some places. I shadowed some others. I'm just the kind of person that I take creative liberties with whatever it is that I shoot, and the result is what it is. But it is another idea of kind of how you can take your camera, your lens. You don't need telescope equipment for these events. These are perfect for cameras and big lenses, and you can really get some spectacular final images out of them.
Very nice. Very nice. Next time I get my images together, I'm coming over to your house.
We'll do a lesson.
You can help
I'm
me.
absolutely fine with that. We'll treat you to dinner and we'll do a lesson.
Okay. That'd be awesome.
Deal.
Okay. The other eclipse, the total, this is the one that was most similar to the one that we're about to experience. This is the path through Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska. Again, it wasn't visible from Colorado. Notice the duration was only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So I have a friend who used to live in Wyoming, and I asked him where would be a good place to go in central Wyoming to see the eclipse. And so he recommended a spot, and it was about midway between Riverton and Casper. And I'll show you why we picked that particular spot.
And we were in Casper for that one.
So Castle Gardens Petroglyph site. It's a
cool.
BLM operated property. There's these spectacular shield-like petroglyphs there carved into the soft rock all over the place. It's historically or prehistorically very interesting place to go. So again, even if we missed the eclipse or something went wrong, we would have something new to, and we actually made several stops in Wyoming on the way home from the eclipse and just made a vacation out of it. So it was great. And even though we were in central Wyoming, an obscure little place, way off the beaten path, there were hundreds of people there that all knew, hey, this is going to be a good place to see the eclipse. And they were coming from other states as well. Here's a montage I have just to show you kind of the range of some of the exposures that I use. So again, I was using a Nikon D7 7000, sorry, f8 ISO 200, 600 millimeter, and then shutter speeds. I was everywhere from 400th of a second to even 1/8,000th of a second. I was shooting at. So I was trying different things, bracketing. This time I think I'll have a little better sense of what to aim for than the last time. But again, eclipses vary, so you want to make sure that you take a range. And the other thing to notice is that you'll see different things at different exposures. So at 250th, 2500, you're going to see the prominences really well, but you're not going to see the corona. You're going to see at 1/400th the corona. Now, some of these you can combine. Like I actually like the images where I see both the prominences and a little bit of the corona, or a little bit more of the corona. And so again, there's some latitude there. But unfortunately, I didn't take any shutter speeds less than 1/400th of a second, and I'm not sure why. I didn't do that, but I won't make that mistake this next time because I really want to get more of the corona this next time around. Okay, here's my 2 diamond ring pictures. Show of hands, who likes the one on the left versus the one on the right? The one on the right obviously is a little bit more dramatic. And
I like them both for different reasons. Yeah.
the one on the right is a 1/250th of a second. Everything else the same. This is 1/500th of a second. This is actually a good exposure for Bailey's beads, but it's not a good exposure for the diamond ring because you really want the brilliance of the ring. You want the corona to be seen all the way around to make the ring, and then you want the brilliance of the diamond. And this is happening so quickly. It's unbelievable how fast this happens. And I would really recommend that when you're shooting this to set your camera so that it shoots multiple exposures, or not necessarily multiple exposures, but just multiple pictures, like a burst mode or something like that, in order to get quite a few of these as it changes. Well, this one on the right, I think is probably one of my best photographs from that eclipse. So I'm going to zoom in and let you see it a little bit more glory here. Again, you can see prominences here. You can see the corona. Lightroom was able to sharpen up some of these little filaments that you see in the corona and just gives it that sparkle that you're looking for in the diamond ring shot. Just to say one more time, this has to be shot. This cannot be looked at. If you take your glasses off to look at this, you're going to get blinded. So you got to keep your glasses on, but you can photograph the diamond ring effect pretty safely. And then Bailey's beads. So here's at 1/500th of a second. Here's at 1/800th of a second. This is shot 12 seconds after the other one, after the previous shot. No, the one before that. So this one here, and then I go 12 seconds later, and that's what I've got here. Now, at 1/500th of a, or 5,000th of a second, there's a lot of merging of these beads. So instead of seeing individual beads, it's kind of more like a bar. Whereas at 1/8,000th of a second, you're starting to see these individual beads, again, the valleys and the chromosphere as well. So some of these things like Bailey's beads, it's really pretty critical what your exposure is. Other things are there's much more latitude in terms of trying to capture it well. Okay. Some more shots of Bailey's beads. This is on the other side now. Again, seeing the prominences. And I had already set up to shoot the diamond ring at 1/400th of a second. And so these, again, it's happening so fast. I just did a series of shots, and that turned out to be pretty good, not just for the totality, but also worked out to be pretty good for this combined image where I get the chromosphere, I get the prominences, I get some Bailey's beads here. Maybe not as sharp as the last image, but still makes for a pretty nice photograph. This is 2 seconds later. So you can just see, again, how quickly things are changing. You have to have a remote shutter release. You have to be clicking away pretty quickly. Totality, this is the picture I had on the first slide. Again, enhanced a little bit in Lightroom. I had, again, shot this with a JPEG, but I was amazed at how much I was able to do in Lightroom. The first time I edited this photograph, I was using Photoshop Elements. When I brought it into Lightroom in preparation for this talk, I was amazed at how much more detail I could get out of the image with the sharpening and with the clarity and texture. So hats off if Yao is still there. I don't know if he's still, but some of the things he was talking about last month applied to this image and got a little bit more out of it. And then just a close-up of this. again, you can see even stars. So it's dark enough at totality that stars will appear. And I won't go into the scientific proof of relativity and Einstein's theory, but it's essentially how his theory was put to the test was during a total solar eclipse, the bending of starlight. Okay, Kara, this is one of your corona shots. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, well, and I think that the advantage that I might have had in my situation for the 2017 eclipses that I didn't have the long lens. I didn't have the 150 to 600, so it forced me further back. And I think because of that, I wanted to get, I could see the bigger picture already through my lens. Like I didn't have to adjust for any of the crop factor or anything like that. So I think that that's why I did really well on these images where you really get to see how broad this goes. And when you see this with your naked eye, I remember I was standing there and, I had my glasses on, I could see a sliver, just tiny little sliver. And then I heard people cheering and I took my glasses off and you see it and it's nice. And then all of a sudden this white light just comes out of nowhere. It's crazy how fast it happens. Like you were saying, the speed, it comes out of nowhere and it kind of shocks you and throws you back. I think that I'm pretty sure I'd have to have James involved in the conversation to remember for sure, but we bracketed these images as well. And I wasn't nearly as prepared then as I will be for this next one. So I just took whatever I thought looked the best and I threw it in Photoshop and tried to bring out just the best details that I could out of the best pictures that we got.
So again, my longest exposure was 1/400th of a second. Here, this is taken f11, 1/13th of a second, and then the next shot, even longer, 1/15th of a second, or that's about the same, I guess.
Very similar.
Is that the same image, or is this a different image?
I believe that one's a different image, and even honestly, even if they had been very, very close within their times, that's what I'm saying about just like if they're close, you could, it's amazing what you can pull out in Photoshop, really.
So good job catching in the corona, and I'll be going for that this time.
I'll be looking forward to it.
So here's another one of your creative montages.
I wanted to turn this one into a clock. I need to do that. I'm waiting for this next one because I want the pictures to be better. But yes, this is one of those examples. And looking back on this one, when I sent this one over to Larry to get ready for this presentation, the image in the middle, I've got a critical eye. I can see where I took the eraser and went a little bit too hard with it in spots where I could have been a little bit more gentle. That's just a matter of practice and experience. This was my first eclipse and my first try. So, you learn with every attempt. And unfortunately, eclipses like these don't come around enough for us to really get to practice with them. But this is one of those things that, and this, because I had the two separate, because you can see the 1,000 millimeter, basically the disc of the clock, that was with that scope there. And then the rest of them were with my 200 millimeter lens. So when you have two different focal lengths going from two different cameras, you can even do more in post to bring out a more artistic kind of representation of the entire from start to finish. This one was really fun. You can tell on the right side of, I'm sorry, I'm getting texts. You can tell on the right side from totality, I don't know, probably about the 4th or 5th, 6th, those right in there. Yes, they're darker because we had clouds. We were fighting clouds on the other side of totality, but I didn't try to fix them and make them look perfect because I wanted to keep it as natural as possible. This, you can see I used a faster shutter speed on the actual totality to keep it kind of less bright, to give you that. And that was where we bracketed. I was able to pick this image apart from some of the ones that had the bigger, whiter, more prominences areas in it. I selected this one instead for this particular sequence to show from start to finish. And this was just another way to show the whole thing. And clouds, light clouds, that's also another good thing to keep in mind. You have thin clouds, you're still going to be able to see a lot of great details, even if it's not crystal clear conditions. So it doesn't have to be perfect to be able to observe and to shoot a total solar eclipse and get some beautiful views. So just know if there's some thin clouds, it's not a bust. You just have to kind of sit with it and see what you can see.
Yes, very good. Oops, what's going on here? All right. Oh, one more here.
Oh, one more. Yes. And this is where I included, you can see on here, I included both the faster shutter speed and the longer shutter speed for both parts of the so those are both total phases. That's just the difference that you get with the shutter speeds that you take. And obviously the longer you have the shutter going, the more you're going to see for the prominences, and the shorter you're going to have just a little kind of subtle light coming, but it's still kind of a cool effect. So for this one, I just wanted to show, and this one I didn't show it going in and out. I just showed going in at full totality and just ending that kind of artistic approach there.
So that phone app that you shared with us earlier, I noticed, Kara, in there that if you want it to time when to take pictures of the partial so that you get an exact match, like it will sequence it so that you get, so that your bites out of the of the eclipse.
That's my understanding. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Which would be a great thing. I was just like taking one I think I was doing every 5 minutes. I was taking a picture of the partial.
And that's why we ended up with 1,000 photos, is because I think we were taking one every 1 or 2 minutes for the first the 2017 one. And I think James wants to do it again, because the way we're going to do it, it's going to not have to save to a memory card. It's going to save straight to our computer, our laptop that we take. So we can do one picture every minute and then have the whole thing to choose from.
All right, we're on to the last couple slides here. This is kind of my sort of closing advice here. Pick a location as close as you can. Select a location, as Karen and I have said, where there's something else of interest. Could be something you want to see you've never seen before, like a national monument. Could be relatives. Could be a vacation trip. Just have some other things to accomplish in case your eclipse is a bust. And have a backup location. Be ready to move last minute. I had to move on the annual eclipse because I was afraid I was going to get clouded out. Before you ever get in your car to go down to an eclipse, make sure you have a clear plan, some goals of what you want to see, what you want to photograph. You probably can't do it all, but make sure you capture the things you really want to capture, and then know the timing. We've given you some guidelines here. You can do that through a web chart, or you can do it through the app that we talked about. Gather up all your equipment, make sure you test it, make sure it's working. I know I eventually threw away the cable release that I had for my for one of my cameras because it didn't work anymore, and I ended up buying another one. So you might want to have a backup for your shutter release, make sure it's working well. You can practice on the sun right now. If you got a solar filter, you can practice on the sun. Don't have to wait till the eclipse starts. You can practice, see how fast it moves, see what focal length you want to use. Practice focusing. I mean, I focus manually because I don't think automatic focus works too well on the disk of the sun. So focus manually, practice that. And then continuously monitor the weather. Also monitor the smoke forecast. I'll have a slide on that in a minute. And then arrive early to set up. Don't get stuck in a traffic jam and miss the eclipse. My wife is my helper, so enlist a helper. It was useful because sometimes I needed another hand or another person to click a different camera while I was busy. Have a comfortable chair and comfortable clothing, and then of course watch the eclipse and enjoy it. So,
and I want to add to one other thing you were talking about earlier, with the cameras. You don't want to accidentally look through the viewfinder when it's really not okay for you to. If you don't have a way to shut that off in your, because my camera is my little old D50 5000 series, they don't have all the bells and whistles. Put a piece of electrical tape over it so you're not tempted to look through it at a phase of the eclipse that's not safe for you to view. That's just another safety tip I wanted to mention earlier, but I noticed my mic was muted, and so I didn't get it out there. So I just wanted to add it.
Great, great. So I did take a look at the smoke map a couple of days ago, and there's all those forest fires or all those fires, grass fires going on in the panhandle of Texas. Actually, it's the largest fire in Texas, I think, history. And then a lot of fires also in Oklahoma. So you might check that where the fires are. Check the smoke map. This was hopefully a month from now. We'll have some rain and the fires will go out, but you want to be careful that you don't get smoked out as well as rained out. All right, I don't have time to read through this, but in the book, there's a very great verbal description of just everything that happens during an eclipse. And it's kind of like a verbal narrative of what you would experience. So that's something you might want to look at in the book. And I'll just close by bringing up one of my montages, very simple montage.
Beautiful. I love it.
And open it up for questions. Sorry we went long, Frank. Didn't know how long this was going to take.
No
I had one
problem.
question.
Jim?
For doing those compilation photos where you have the sun in various different coverages, but you have a foreground that's in full color. I'm assuming that at some point in there you have to actually just take the lens off and take the picture normally, and then you stack it with all the other ones. But does anybody have any idea how those are made?
I've wondered the same thing, to be quite honest with you, because I've never taken, my focus has always been the target and not the whole scene. I've wondered the same thing. My assumption is just what you said, that you would take the filter off, you would get foreground, and you would blend them together in post. But that's just one other one kind of that seems to be in your same boat.
I'm looking for that slide. Where did it go?
Most of those are a fairly wide angle shot with all the sunshots just photoshopped in, that I've seen, at least, where the sun is way too large for the angle on the foreground picture.
It doesn't match. They didn't do a good job of blending the depths.
Where did that picture go? Oh, here it is. Yeah, you talking about this one?
Yeah.
This one up here? Yeah, I'm assuming that they took a foreground shot at some point, and then they did they probably put this together. I don't know if this is actually a long exposure, a time lapse. Actually, I'm gonna have to experiment with that, and do a little more research, because I would love to get a shot like this. That would be spectacular. But it's probably requires a little bit more investigation to figure out how to do it.
Well, and just looking at that one, I could be wrong, but that one actually might be legitimately, because isn't that at one of the, are we looking at one of the poles here where the sun it's not high in the sky during this eclipse, is my thought?
Yeah, this is
Svalbard.
Svalbard.
Yeah.
It's up near above the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, so that one actually might be very, very accurate as far as the way that they did it, and with the filter, they may have just popped the filter off for a couple of minutes and then just put it back on, because I just feel like that might actually be true, since the sun doesn't go up over the crowd here. Whereas where we're going to be, we're not going to have a view like that, because it's going to arc over high in the sky during this too. So that's another thing that makes you question it.
And Texas isn't going to look this cool.
No.
I don't know if that answered. We didn't really answer your question, but we would just have to do some more research on that.
I don't have the answer. Yeah, I'm theorizing with you. I think that you're probably right in your thinking.
We'll find out.
Other questions?
I'm reading out of chat. Elena asked about what type of filter to purchase. So those are actually, I think each of you were using a Orion brand, but they need to be a good quality optic, right?
Are you talking about for the end of the lens?
Yes.
Yeah, I got mine. I think it was about $100. And I don't remember where we ordered it from. I've had it a long time now. But yeah, it'll have this. I don't think this one, I don't know where the box that it came from is at. I mean, it's got the warning on the side that says don't look at the sun without blah blah blah. But this is glass. This is definitely a well-made filter. So I would trust the Orion brand. And what is this Seymour brand, Larry, that you got for your
You know,
binoculars?
it looks like maybe the same people made it because yours looks very much like mine.
It's a very similar design. I
Very,
agree.
very,
It's a
very
very
similar.
demo. Yeah. Mhm.
And there's a lot of cheaper ones out there. They're just made out of folded cardboard. And then they put some spacers in there. And I just didn't want to use something that flimsy. I
Mm-mm.
wanted something with a real
Especially
know,
for binoculars.
frame, that would
Yeah.
stay on there because I was just worried they'd fall off and I'd screw something up.
Mhm.
So I spent a little bit more. And again, for my binoculars, I got this pair for about 120. And I just ordered this, like it came very quickly. The one for my end of my 600 millimeter is larger. It costs about $110. Again, it's glass. The other two are a polymer film. This one is made of glass and is good for photography. So there's a lot of them out there. I just read the websites and see what they say. I mean, the Seymour seemed like it was a good brand.
Uh-huh.
Seemed like they were clicking off all the things I was looking for, and they weren't too expensive. I mean, you can obviously spend more than $100, but I didn't see any reason to.
And if you're hesitant, if you go to a website and you're not sure you trust it, then go to some place that's trusted, whether it's High Point Scientific or what's that other one? Oh, Celestron. Like there's some actual you can go to where you just know that, yeah, you may pay a little more, but you're not going to have a doubt in your mind about it being the right thing for you.
So Stan had a question about the glasses, that sometimes there could be items that are not up to speed, or he used the term forgeries. Is there any way to know that you have adequate protection, you're getting good glasses?
You're talking about these little cardboard
Yes.
ones with the
Yeah.
film?
Yeah,
I
if
haven't had any problem with them.
you go to the gas station, how do you know?
I guess. Well, I didn't buy the one at the gas. I don't think I bought that one. Maybe I did. I don't know. Look to see if it says anything about the what is it? The ISO standard that I mentioned earlier. See if it refers to that. If it doesn't, then I'd probably steer clear of it. But if it says that it meets that standard, then it's probably okay. These are not expensive at all to buy.
They
And-
can take that as well, though, right?
Do what?
You take the imprint could be fake too. The ISO standard,
Yeah. What about it?
it could be fake.
Oh yeah, it could be faked. Yeah. And again, that's why maybe you want to buy from a reliable, if you buy from B&H Photoshop, or you get it at Mike's Camera or something like that, you're probably going to be able to trust it more than just finding some cheap thing on the internet.
I agree. In other words, don't buy your glasses where you buy your burrito.
No,
Wow.
you can, but you'll never see your burrito again.
Can I quote you on that, Stan? All right. Any other questions? I mean, and you guys are free to, text or email me, or if you want copies of slides on this presentation. Let me
Maybe
just
also
stop sharing here for a second.
about about
Thank you both.